All right, so let's get into some of the takeaways of the Durham report, which were some things. I guess the key things that we didn't know. One of the major details was that this started this plot to paint Donald Trump as being involved in a conspiracy with Russia started in the Hillary Clinton campaign. This we knew. This we knew beforehand. However, what we did not know is who knew that. Right? Like, we knew that this started at the Hillary Clinton campaign and then went to the intelligence agencies. Not only did the FBI and the Department of Justice know about this, but in fact, the head of the CIA, Brennan, briefed Obama about this. So this really does, although of course, we always would have guessed Barack Obama was aware of this. We've talked about this before on the show, but it used to just be speculation. It is no longer speculation. We all thought, well, look, if like we knew it was like went up to the absolute highest levels. We knew it went up to at least the head of the FBI and the Attorney General and the CIA director. Is it really likely that all of them are involved in this operation against the presidential campaign and Obama was unaware of it? I suppose it was possible, but I would have bet every dollar I had that it wasn't. But we now know that Obama was briefed on this. And so just to keep this in mind, that Obama, through all the time when he was pushing the theories as well, he was well aware that this had started in Hillary Clinton's campaign as a specific tactic to as it says in the report, to distract away from her email scandal. To say, oh, yeah, well, he's in bed with Vladimir Putin. And this way, they could also lump Julian Assange in with the Russians. And then anytime they wanted to talk about Hillary Clinton's emails, this could be her out. Well, this is just because my opponent's a Russian puppet, as she called him at one of the debates.
All the puzzle pieces have been laid out to just go, Hillary Clinton sat down, she thought this one up, and they just ran with it for 4 years and undermined him. I mean, half of his presidency was revolved around just trying to defeat these claims in the media. Like, he might have been able to get that wall built, he might have been able to put forward other initiatives, but he was democratically elected, and, the people that wanted him in there were definitely deprived of him having, like, a valid presidency.
Yeah, no, that's right. It's worth mentioning also that Durham was turned down for interviews with several key players here, which is crazy that they're even allowed to do this. Like, they just wouldn't cooperate with him. James Comey, Andrew McCabe, William Priestap, Glenn Simpson, there are a whole bunch of them, and Peter Strzok agreed to talk, but only about like one specific aspect and wouldn't answer questions about anything else. There were a whole lot of people who just straight up would not cooperate with this investigation. And he still came away with what he did. There was another really interesting little part of this report where it describes, reading from Politico here, the report describes a dramatic moment in one of the Durham interviews. During the 2016 campaign, the U.S. intelligence community learned of Russian intelligence and analysis alleging that Clinton's team planned to stir up a scandal about Trump's Russia ties to distract the public from her email server problem. The unverified Russian claim has been previously disclosed, and Democrats have derided it as incendiary disinformation from a foreign adversary that was seeking to meddle in the election. In 2016, then CIA Director John Brennan briefed then President Barack Obama on it. However, according to Durham, most of the Crossfire Hurricane personnel he discussed it with hadn't seen it, including the probe's original supervisory special agent. After reviewing the Russian intelligence with Durham's team, the agent became visibly upset and emotional, left the interview room with his counsel, and subsequently returned to state emphatically that he had never been appraised of it, according to the report. The agent, quote, expressed a sense of betrayal, that no one had informed him of the intelligence. He added that regardless of its veracity, someone should have told him about it. James Baker, the FBI's former general counsel, also said he'd first learned of the intelligence from Durham's team. He said that if he had known about it during the probe, he would have been much more skeptical about Christopher Steele's reports about allegations of a secret channel between the Trump organization and a Russian bank. Durham said the other FBI agents would also have been more skeptical about Trump-Russian allegations had they seen the intelligence, which would have reduced the risk of reputational damage both to the targets of the investigation as well as ultimately to the FBI. Guys, I think Brennan, I think Comey, Obama, Hillary Clinton, all of those guys. I do, by the way, I'll grant, it's possible also when they're just talking to these FBI agents who are like furious that they were kept out of the dark, it's also possible that just out as this is coming out, they realize how illegal the shit they did was.
Right.
And this is the guy who's going to be recommending charges or not. And they're like, oh, well, no one ever told me that. And if I had been told, I would have acted completely differently. It's also possible that there are a lot of people within these institutions who are actually brainwashed into believing in the institutions. You know what I mean? And they're actually like, well, no, we wouldn't be doing that. I wouldn't be getting these orders unless there was really a credible source that Donald Trump is working in bed with the Russians and we're saving democracy. Like it is possible to me either way on that front. I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised either way.
Is Comey still posting sad Instagram images? Didn't he write a book like My Struggle or whatever?
Yes.
Like a Mein Kampf book, but about Trump instead of the Jews. You think, you know what would be an interesting starting point in terms of unraveling this is Mueller. What was he doing for 2 years? I mean, you and I thought that Donald Trump was going to go down because they were going to concoct this crazy, nonsensical thing, and they'd, be able to open up enough doors that they would get him for something else. And he managed to somehow survive that. I mean, talk about, there's some truth to the fact, greatest witch hunt ever, Donald Trump is still standing. He must be the cleanest individual that's ever graced politics in America.
It's one of the only aspects of this whole saga that we really got wrong.
Oh, that we thought that they would get him for something.
We thought they'd find something.
Right.
We were like, there's no way they're going to, because that's the whole plan here is they'll make this shit up. They'll sick the special prosecutor on him and they'll find some crime he's committed over the years unrelated to Russia. And then just say, look, in the course of this investigation, we found this.
But now that we know that the basis of the investigation was false, and maybe, Brian, you can look up how much money was spent on that, but I believe it went on for at least 2 years, and Mueller kept up the racket like they were on to something the entire time. But now with the retrospective of that, we know that this was the Clintons came up with a campaign to try and pretend like he was a Russian asset. They got the deep state on it. What was he actually doing for 2 years? He had this incredibly well-paid prosecuting team. What were they looking into for 2 full years? What were they doing?
Yeah. No, and look, we've made the point before, but it's worth restating here that Mueller could have come out at any time and put an end to this like insane media blitz.
Well, he was a part of it. He's one of the higher
clearly.
ups. Yeah,
clearly. And he was, and right, because it seems like in many ways that was kind of one of the points of the whole thing, right? Was to be like, well, look, even if we can't remove him, then we'll be able at least to make this the story of his entire presidency and box him into a corner where he can't work with Russia, which is, by the way, again, if you remember back then, this was Donald Trump was running on shouldn't we have détente with Russia and get along with Russia and work with them to end all of the wars in the Middle East. They're in Syria at the time, killing ISIS. Great. We'll let them kill ISIS. We'll pull our troops out. We'll get out of the business of trying to overthrow these regimes in the Middle East, and we'll make friends with Russia. We'll have a good relationship with them. And then this was to box him into a corner where he couldn't follow through on that, because when you're getting called a Russian spy every day on TV, it's pretty hard to then come out and say, I'm cutting a deal with Russia, because that would have just been, look, proof that he is in fact a Russian spy. And so he didn't. And in fact, he started trying to prove what a Russian spy he wasn't by being more adversarial toward Russia. And didn't that work out wonderfully? Where we are now. What a great strategy that was for the safety of the world.
The best we might see is a congressional hearing pulling in these characters.
They won one court case. There were 3. and one of them they won. They got the FBI guy who forged or manipulated the FISA warrant for Carter Page, but of course he got no jail time. He did get convicted, but got no jail time, or he pled guilty, but got no jail time. This is, of course, the guy who manipulated the application for the FISA warrant on Carter Page that kicked off the whole thing. Remember Carter Page, who was supposed to be a Russian spy as well. And they got 3 FISA warrants on him. He was never charged with anything because it was all bullshit. And in fact, the CIA had told the FBI that we know Carter Page is not a Russian spy because he's working with us. So it was a whole crazy thing there. By the way, a couple other little details in the report that were kind of interesting. They did ask Hillary Clinton herself about this, and this is it. What a great Hillary Clinton response to this. This jumped out at me as so funny. She said it was really sad. I get it. You have to go down every rabbit hole. I'll say things like, I'll be like, okay, Donald Trump was clearly framed for treason by his own deep state. And people will be like, oh, so Dave loves Donald Trump. Oh, really? Well, don't you know he did this thing wrong and this thing wrong? And you're like, well, yes, okay. That can be true. And it can also be true that he was framed by his own deep state for treason. They don't contradict each other. This is just what happened. That's that. The other thing that is one of my kind of major takeaways of all of this is, like, given everything that we know now, it really is interesting that, look, there's basically two people who are being framed here, and or two entities, whatever, a person and a country. But we focus a lot on how Donald Trump was framed. And that is fair because, as Americans, it's a crazy thing. No matter how much we all know this system is corrupt, it's such a crazy thing for the sitting president to be framed by his own deep state that is supposed to work for him. That's like, it's shocking to anyone, to any normie. That would be crazy shocking. And even to people who are kind of like hip to some of this stuff, it's still like, wow, they really went for it. They really did it. But Donald Trump is not the only, person being framed here. And the other person is Vladimir Putin. And to me, that's kind of another angle of this that I think people don't appreciate enough, is that it's not just, if you say, like, Vladimir Putin overthrew our elections to install Donald Trump, that's not just framing Donald Trump for being, a Russian asset or whatever. You're also framing Vladimir Putin for being in this conspiracy with Donald Trump that he was not involved in. And now that we're in this situation where we are fighting a proxy war on Russia's borders, it's just interesting to think about how this all plays in to each other. There's, if you go back to that 2008 memo that the current CIA director, Bill Burns, wrote to Condoleezza Rice. Of course, at the time, Bill Burns was the ambassador to Russia, and Condoleezza Rice was the Secretary of State. And the memo is entitled "Niet means Niet," and we only have this because Julian Assange leaked it. This was a private cable. This was not for the public. This is what the ambassador was telling the Secretary of State to keep her apprised on the situation, not thinking about public relations or what the propaganda angle is here that we're trying to tell the people, just what they were saying behind closed doors, or so they thought. And he talks about the whole memo is about Ukrainian entry into NATO and how much this is going to be a problem for Russia. And there's a passage in there where he says, basically, like, all the experts here are saying that because of the deep divides in Ukraine, if we push for Ukraine to join NATO, it's going to lead to instability. It could even lead to a civil war there, like the civil war they had from 2014 through 2022. He goes, it could even lead to a civil war there. So he's predicting something that comes true later. And he goes, in that eventuality, Russia will have to decide if they want to intervene, a decision Russia does not want to have to make. That's what our CIA director, then ambassador to Russia, is telling our Secretary of State. He's saying Russia doesn't want to do this. Okay, they don't want to have to be faced with this choice. But that did happen. There was a civil war there, ultimately, obviously. They did decide to intervene by invading the country. But this is something interesting to keep in mind, even according to Burns from years before the invasion. He was saying Russia does not want to be in a position where they have to make this decision. And what I would submit is that it seems to me like this was a move of desperation from Vladimir Putin. Like, he knew how dangerous this would be and how many problems this could cause for him. And so when you think about this, and of course, if anyone says the Russians were provoked in any way, you get denounced as like a whatever. You're spreading Putin propaganda or some ridiculous shit like that. But just think about this, because that's the other big like elephant in the room here. Is that it's not just that they framed Donald Trump, it's that they framed Vladimir Putin too. And think about what that might, like, what would your mentality be like from Vladimir Putin's point of view? Just strategically think about that. Doesn't mean you have to agree with him, but like, let's think about it from that point of view. When you have the most war-hungry country in the world, the United States of America's federal government, and you have the CIA director, the CIA, our war-making machine, when you have them all publicly claiming that you have overthrown our democracy, like really laying down a justification for war, like telling the world. It's not just that idiots like Brian Stelter were saying it. It's that idiots like John Brennan were saying it. You've got the highest level of the American intelligence apparatus claiming every single day that you have overthrown the democracy of the United States of America. You did something that the British Empire couldn't do, that the Nazis couldn't do, that the commies couldn't do. You did it. Something Osama bin Laden couldn't do. All the enemies we've had, the first one to ever overthrow our democracy is Vladimir Putin. If anyone heard that, they would have to start preparing themselves for war, right? I mean, like, you'd be like, oh, okay, you know what these Americans do when they start saying that when they start laying the groundwork. And they're not just saying he's got weapons of mass destruction or something like that, They're not just saying like, oh, he's about to go genocidal. They're saying he started a war with us. That certainly, if true, would have been an act of war, a more severe act of war than anything you could imagine. He stole the election from Hillary Clinton and installed his puppet. In hindsight, it might have been a little reckless to be talking that way about Russia. Maybe that wasn't smart policy. There's maybe some unintended consequences associated with it.